You can't see carbon dioxide or methane. Lack of place attachment. We'll move somewhere that benefits from climate change. But I think about how we all have moved around the world for corporate advantage. You know, we let ourselves be objects in the game there. Not all of us, though. Deferred gratification for actions. Politicians who take aggressive climate actions incur upfront costs and will likely be out of office or dead before many of the benefits of their actions can be measured. And I think back in the 1970s, we had more politicians who could stand up for climate change than we have now. Lack of self-efficacy. One individual can't make any dent in this problem. But what did Margaret Mead say? One person. Complexity. Well, this is true. Wicked problems like climate change may not have a solution. Well, it's complex, but I think we need to keep at it. Motivated reasoning. The devotion to free market libertarianism requires rejection of non-market-based climate policies. Hidden agenda is what I would call that, rather than motivated reasoning. Anyway, faith that justifies the status quo or offers salvation from climate collapse. I won't give their example. You all have your own for that. Techno-fix ideology. Geoengineering solutions for climate. Those are frightening. Optimism bias. Dismissing personal risks or discounting future threats. If I can't see it, why do I have to deal with it? Sunk costs. Investments of dollars, dreams, and time in support of the status quo. Discredence and denial. Distrust of science and or government. Diverted attention, spending 8 hours daily watching YouTube and other venues of screen time. Affective image associations, emotional attachment to ideals used to define one's worldview. Cultural learning theory, clinging to beliefs about abortion, homosexuality, etc., that make one have a certain position even though it has nothing to do with climate change. Poor issue framing. Treating green opportunities for renewable energy as threats or lifestyle sacrifices. I thought that table was important enough to go over the whole thing with it. Okay, chapter 6, living in the Anthropocene or the man-made moment in time. Business as usual or compassionate retreat. This reminded me of Naomi Klein. Shelley, you and I were talking earlier about Naomi seems to incarnate the sense of compassion for humanity. Atmospheric CO2 at 400 parts per million in 2013, and no policies in place to prevent it from rising to 450. Geoengineering is increasingly seen as a credible option for mitigation and to buy us time for permanent solutions. Now these terms are technozoic versus ecozoic, and then at the bottom, management and ethics. Technozoic usually goes with management, ecozoic usually goes with ethics. So let's see what they have to say about it. Humans have been altering the Earth for millennia, but today's impact and scale is unprecedented. Thomas Berry suggests we move from the technozoic, which is a mindset to continue to, I love the way they phrase this, a mindset to continue to digest the biosphere, excavate the lithosphere, dispose of waste on land, sea, and air. From technozoic to ecozoic, which is a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. There are two approaches here: management, which is to optimize climate for human well-being, or the ethic approach, seeing humans as interdependent. Technozoic is represented by too big to fail, distributed risk, sacrifice zones, citizens as consumers or objects. Ecozoic, defined more by respect and reciprocity, a person as a responsible citizen, participatory citizen. Humans as members and not masters in a community of life. To me, that's just the most important right there. Human as members, not masters. Geoengineering is a technozoic management approach. It legitimizes technology without questioning the worldview generating the problems technology is supposed to solve. It's a form of addiction. They're saying that technology, in a sense, has put us in this fix. How can we make technology fix it? There are three issues that geoengineering fails to address. One, social inequity produced by climate change. Those who are bearing the risk are not asked. So it's an environmental justice issue. Two, climate change is a result of complex interaction of multiple subsystems, such as ocean cycles, land cover. There's so many more, I didn't even put them down. And geoengineering is unidimensional action. There's no guarantee of result. There's just too much we don't understand. And of course, the last but not least is the problem of playing God, hubris and overconfidence. Now the ethical approach, reduce the impact on Earth. It must be fair and just. This is what compassionate retreat would be about. Universe is a community of subjects, not a collection of objects. And here are three elements in compassionate retreat. Being mindful of scientific uncertainties of the Earth systems, humility, and social decisions, not necessarily technological decisions. Two, a balance of power favors wealthy minority over the majority, and it's the majority who bear the burden. Makes it unjust, and we need to acquire consent. And three, in compassionate retreat, rethink the assumption that brought us to the Anthropocene. Do we have the right to dominate? Compassionate retreat requires movement away from economic growth or degrowth. We need to urgently redirect investments away from fossil fuels and military. Instead of money to the banks, money needs to go to regenerate the Earth. Chapter 7, governing people as members of the Earth community. Today's governance systems and our consumer culture facilitate the degradation that support life and support human well-being. It defines nature as property. It legitimizes behavior harmful to the common good. And the policies reflect our narcissism and our sense of superiority to the rest of nature. Narcissism has popped up in a lot of the studies I've been doing lately, as in an example of the U.S. being a very narcissistic culture. The primary goal of governance should be humans should behave so that they thrive without degrading the Earth or the Earth community that's so essential to life. To transform governance, we must transform society. That means each and every one of us. Earth jurisprudence is needed, and I think most of us know about the Rights of Nature document that was developed in 2010 in Cochabamba, Bolivia. It's a declaration that recognizes Earth as indivisible, a living community of interrelated, interdependent beings with inherent rights. It defines human duties to Mother Earth and other beings, and that humans are only one component. Last month, I left out most of the indigenous section of the 2013 World Watch. Well, this is a lot of what it was about. There are many different groups that agree with what I just said and agree with these 4 points below. There are grassroots groups, there are national groups, international groups. Bolivia, Ecuador, Bhutan, and many indigenous believe in the following: the acceptance and the need for fundamental change to governmental systems. Public support for governmental solutions is down since we have been commodifying nature. We must increase the discourse of rights of nature to break down barriers between social justice and environmental organizations. The indigenous believe that the Earth is animate and sacred. Scared. Did I have scared? Thank you very much. I've noticed that. Governments grant extractive rights, and local communities can vote local ordinances against that pressure, in other words, self-determination. But you've probably been seeing how Denton, Texas, where one of the big universities in Texas is now being plagued by the fossil fuel companies to have to reverse, I don't know if it's just an ordinance, but they've been saying, no, you can't frack in Denton. Anyway, I haven't paid attention to that lately. Many different rights or justice groups must coalesce. Animal rights, human rights, indigenous rights, youth, faith, labor, to create new social norms of rights of nature and rights of all beings.
Molly, if there are too many questions, then we'll never get through here, but the first time I read the Cochabamba Declaration, I thought it was really important and outstanding, and I never hear it referred to anymore. Did I have some weaknesses in it?
That part I don't know. They didn't go into detail about it here at all. They made it as a mention of one of those standards that we need to start thinking about. The president of Bolivia, who's Evo Morales, is indigenous himself. And so there's a lot of movement toward indigenous rights in South America. And I'm thrilled. I've lived in South America a lot. And I see that they're overcoming some of these negatives in certain ways that we have yet to be able to do. In Canada, the indigenous are really stirring it up. Not just Keystone, but everything else, and so forth. And a lot of our indigenous are working at it too. I have friends in the Pueblo communities in New Mexico who are definitely working at it. Okay, moving on, Dick. Advancing ecological stewardship via the commons and human rights. The commons is an important term. I don't know if you have a good definition of it or not. Here we'll play with it a little bit. Commons is an idea that's today's political and legal systems are outmoded, characterized by free trade, deregulation, privatization, the lessening of democratic oversight of the economic activity, and this has done little to address unprecedented crisis. Neoliberal policies need to be shifted to ecological commons and the rights-based governance or green governance. From anthropocentrism to biocentrism, from price systems to natural systems. Values should include nature and social well-being. The commons, this term, is a regime for managing common pool resources that eschews individual property rights or state control. In other words, it doesn't look at things as individual property rights or state control. It relies on common property arrangements. It's self-organized. It's enforced in idiosyncratic ways and social ways. And typically, but not always, it's democratic. The commons gives us practical democratic ways of naming and protecting value that the market is incapable of doing. It forces a conversation on market externalities. The history of legal recognition of commons goes back millennia, a transcultural institution, and it's actually more of a legal tradition and not a law. So I'm not sure how we can institute this, but let's continue. It helps us get past the idea of state versus market and public versus private. But for the shift to happen, public law must formally recognize countless now existing commons. And with the Republican Congress coming in, I have great difficulty seeing how we're going to do this, but onward and upward. Here are some existing commons. Indigenous commons that depend on customary practice, what the habit has been. The Alaska Permanent Fund as a stakeholder trust to manage shared assets. And then those examples advance the policy of collective action. For commons to achieve promises governance template, we must have one, general internal governance principles and policies that guide development and management. Macro principles, economic in other words, and policies that state and market embrace to facilitate quasi-autonomous commons with peer governance, and legal strategies that civil society can pursue to validate ecological commons. Some of these things seem so difficult for us to achieve, but you've got to get the seed idea out there, and this is one. When I think about damaging of the commons right now in the United States, I think about our federal lands where they're already fracking, you know, state parks or whatever. How many have done it kind of under the cover of night? And oh, you mean they already did that 2 years ago? We must reimagine state and market. The commons would be green governments. We must gird ourselves for the ambitious task of mobilizing new commitments, devising new policies and legal initiatives, cultivating new understandings of environment, economics, human rights, governance, and the commons. Chapter 11, the too polite revolution, understanding the failure of past U.S. climate legislation. I would never call it the too polite revolution. Anyway, in the past decade, 20 climate bills have failed, probably due to souring of the economy, sharp right-hand turn of the Republican Party, President Obama choosing health care as a major push. Green groups made tactical errors and they relied on a few large stakeholders. Some of the big green groups didn't just make tactical errors. I think they were going for the money too. Greens liked cap and trade and cap and carbon. Corporations liked cap and trade because it's a single market-based non-tax. Leading wind and solar companies were never invited to any of this decision-making. Corporations not interested in regulating carbon, when we talk about cap on carbon, but in the wealth transfer to their companies, where they're voting on climate change. And Naomi Klein's Capitalism versus Climate, the lower carbon emissions only achieved by a radical change in the economic and political belief system. Polite revolution or activism favored the elitist insider approach, not the aggressive grassroots approach. But read Naomi Klein, she's got great stuff on. I even wrote down there are at least 4 of our well-known environmental organizations who played into the elitist approach. Can you remember environmental defense?
They were actually had their own drilling.
That's right.
Drilling program.
And Conservation International, and there are 2 more. The Sierra Club, and Carl Pope was the head of the Sierra Club. It did wrong turns, but now that Michael Broom is in charge, it's doing a lot better. At any rate, we can't just believe those big organizations. I gave very little place to what China is doing, but they are doing stuff. And when I hear anybody say, well, we can't do anything until China does something, I think that's just a false, totally a false. It's a wrong way to look at it. But anyway, some of the problems with China are addressed here. Whether the issue is water pollution or climate change, China has ambitious environmental targets, laws, and regulations. And they have political will at the center. But in the absence of strong citizen oversight, public participation, government transparency, implementation will be thwarted by structural problems, including collusion between local officials and polluters. So I'll let it at that for that sector. Assessing the outcomes of Rio Plus 20, there are only 2 things I want to mention for this page. Greenpeace dubbed that the event's 50-page outcome document, the future we want, the longest suicide note in history. At any rate, it did have some results, and they're at the second half of this paragraph. Resulted in conceptual, institutional, operational. Oh, by the way, Greenpeace is one of the good environmental organizations. They have maintained the upward motion from the beginning, though people have done some wrong stuff, like what was the recent one when they worked on the those anthropological scrapings in the dirt in Peru at the Lima meeting. That was too bad. Youngsters getting too excited. Resulted in conceptual, institutional, operational outcomes with direct impact in 2015 the Paris operational agenda. Created a new narrative of sustainable development, rekindled commitment to sustainable development, new platform for economic prosperity, social inclusion, environmental stewardship through UN structures, stimulated pledges exceeding $513 billion billion, thank you, an agreement to create sustainable developmental goals to guide future actions. Chapter 14, I think we only have 21 chapters here, so we're moving in toward the kill here. How local governments have become a factor in global sustainability. 50% of the world population, this is what makes what Johanna has to say to us, and she can come talk really good. 50% of the world population is in the cities, and it's because they've become key factors in global sustainability across countries. Locally, global. These are public administration units, such as in a province, a region, a department, a prefecture, a village. Leadership frequently is locally appointed. There's cooperation across countries. Cooperate closely and perceive self as counterpoints to national governments and the UN. Local is faster than national to take action on environmental initiatives. They're closer to the problems. They're right there. Take action to reduce greenhouse gas and call on national government. Progress is slow at national level. Local is successful because it's close to the people. Cities Climate Registry. Is that what Johanna is in? Anybody know?
No, she's in Jamaica.
Okay. Well, I think they have a lot of things in common. All right, now we get to the economic governance section. This chapter is saying, and I'm going to just give you a quick, it's already 2-3, give you kind of a quick synopsis, let's see if I can. Suggests that corporations really can play a role. They can go where government cannot go. They're flexible, efficient. World Trade Organization has proposed to establish a C20, C30, C40 coalition. 20 countries, 30 companies, 40 cities work together to counteract climate change. But some civil groups argue that corporate influence at the UN diverts organization from tackling root causes of environmental, social, economic problems and puts credibility at risk. And I remember so many groups at the climate meeting in New York, groups saying, get the corporations out of here. They don't need to be given credence in here at all. At any rate, this Sustainability Development Goals and the Millennium Development Goals are ideas that would include corporations. And the UN wants to put corporations into this work stream for a universal sustainable developmental agenda. Here's another one that the UN initiative by Kofi Annan called Global Compact. But just to support what I just said about the problems of corporations, there are 55 members in that Global Compact. 11 of the 55 are from extractive industries, 4 are utilities, and only 1 is representative of alternative energy. Pragmatics, I'm going to skip that section. Pragmatics include business, but what happens when public good is not a good investment? So, if we're going to do it at an international level, the UN must adopt standardized guidelines, system-wide conflict of interest policies, assess future business activity carefully, have a neutral body evaluate, member states must pay full dues, and all should be monitored by civil society groups. This was probably the best chapter overall. That's what I'm thinking it is. Making finance serve the real economy. Since 2008, financial sector reform is a major policy focus around the world, but the focus was on stability, not how finance shaped the policy the last 30 years, or how to remedy the massive economic inequity of unemployment and growing indebtedness. The financial market's broader social purpose should be shared prosperity. Growing influence of finance has distorted public discourse, narrowed who is being heard, and is not reconciling the economy with the environment. Financialization is the new master of the broader economy, and it must be tamed. The U.S. economy before 1980 was Keynesian. In other words, it was wage-led growth model. The growth in economic productivity drove growth in wages, which fueled demand that drove full employment which provided the incentive to invest, which drove productivity. I'm sure that's a simplification, but I sure like that. After 1980, the first critical change in the Keynesian system was wage-led growth. Public utility models of finance were dismantled. The link between productivity and growth and wages were severed. The New Deal system of regulation was dismantled through deregulation, and the result, or one of them, average hourly wage stagnated despite productivity.